Absolutely. I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think part of the why I was a little bit hesitant earlier to basically to criticize him on the post itself, like unlike other politicians, he's actually engaging with people. We don't have that in South Sudan. That's the problem. We don't know what people are thinking. You assume, you assume there's just a lot of people writing on liberation repetitions, a lot of people writing on clan, tribal sort of allegiance and reputation. Nobody really knows what these people think, if they have any opinions on policies. And I want to, I sort of don't want to dunk on someone that is making an effort to engage with people, and he does that very well. He did that a lot on TikTok. I mean, not TikTok. What's it called? Twitter. And he does it on Facebook. He has a huge following. He doesn't filter. That's sort of like as much as we hate that from people occupying positions of consequence, positions where their words matter. This is something admirable about.
Hello, everyone. Those who will be joining us, I'm joined today by Bior, and he will get to introduce himself later. So, what we'll be talking about is the recent controversy surrounding what Honorable Mabior Garang said about the difference between PhD academia and politics. So, we'll just have this is not the regular interview, it's just a conversation about that topic. So, those of you who want to join to have questions, you're by all means welcome. But this is just a lively conversation about what it means in terms of politics, in terms of intellectual engagement, in terms of the value of education in South Sudan. So that's what we'll be talking about. So this is just a lively conversation. All right. So I would like Bior to jump in and introduce himself, and then we'll go from there.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yep. Hello, everyone. My name is Bior Abuoi Arok. If you speak Dinka. And I live and work in the U.S. I'm for South Sudanese people. I'm from Duchess County in South Sudan in Jonglei. Currently, I live in Philadelphia, where I work for an organization called ECFMG that verifies that regulates foreign medical graduates in the U.S. I'm very glad to this is a very interesting topic, and I'm very much looking forward to sharing my thoughts. I've seen a lot of discussions online about it, and I think it's a very good. It shows just how robust, our political climate is in South Sudan. The people are just yearning for an opportunity to express themselves and and have disagreements respectfully. So I'm really really interested in. I'm very glad you invited me, and I think this is a really good topic to get into.
So one of the reasons why I invited you to be part of this conversation is I've seen your comments, and they are very comprehensive, very informed, very thoughtful. So that's why I invited you to be part of this conversation. And those of you who are watching, if you want to have comments. If you feel there's something you want to contribute, we can actually invite you to the studio if you have strong opinions on this issue. Now, I want to begin by saying a number of things about this conversation. This is a lively debate. This is not a debate about denigrating people, about undermining people. It's just about thinking about what do these things mean in terms of our political discourse. Because we tend to say things, we don't think much about them. We tend to ethnicize, we politicize them, and then we put them within the way in which we live in our communities. Now, I want to ask you, and then I'll respond. What do you think about what Honorable Mabior say? What are your thoughts about what he said?
I'm pretty torn up about this because initially I was because it's different from what we've seen this discussion of every now and then it pops up where people are people are angry at you would normally see somebody with a PhD comment on a controversial issue, and the very first insult that you'll see is what a waste of PhD. So I feel there's very interesting sentiments going on in our country about the role of PhDs. And I don't know if people truly understand what it means to have a PhD and what is a PhD good for. I don't know if our people truly have that. I think Mabior's comment sort of mirrors exactly what I suspect the general population in South Sudan thinks about PhDs, which is it's a certificate that gets you appointments in a ministry. or in politically. And then if you look at it that way, maybe it's okay to think, it makes sense to think, well, how qualified are PhDs for politics? What is it about it? Is PhD a necessity for politics? I think on this issue, the overwhelming answer is no. You don't need a PhD to be a politician. If that is what Mabior was trying to say, I think is right, that you do not need a PhD to be a politician. But I suspect, just reading between the lines, it sounded a lot more like he was saying that PhDs are not really, the PhD is not really useful in our setting or politically, that you needed something else besides that, political competence. So, you have to be politically savvy. I don't know if that is actually an end in itself. Is the goal of politics to be able to play politics, or should we look for in leadership? I don't know what the definition of political competence is. I'm assuming it just means you're politically savvy or you understand political issues. Or if that is the case, a PhD in political science understands, or a PhD in some other, humanities field or economics, understands political issues in our country just as much as, the next guy. And so I will let you actually break this down for me, because I've been sort of like, just my information on this is based on what I've read on faith. And I don't want to mischaracterize what Mabior was trying to say. And I think I did watch the video that you did that I thought did a very good sort of broke it down really well. Literally, that initial post, sentence by sentence, what what is getting at, and with a little bit of a historical context, or a little bit of a, you talked briefly about some previous comments. There was a thing, I don't actually remember this, it might have been before I came back on Facebook, something about PhD din, which trying to insinuate that PhDs are bell, or like people are not, they are not good, they're not smart people because of. So clearly there is more to this comment than what you're getting from the post. There's a history there. You can sense a little bit of a bit. I don't want to say degree envy, because what does Mabior Garang have to be envious of for someone with a PhD? He has a name recognition that is unparalleled in South Sudan. So, but that's what it came out as. It came out as degree jealousy of sorts. So I'm still confused. My position is, the more education we have, the better. If you look at the statistics around the world on countries that are doing well, I took a glance at that actually before I came on here. If you look at the number of PhDs per capita and the human development, economic, GDP, whatever, it's a very strong correlation. The more educated a country is, the better it fares, in every other sphere of life. For a country like ours, that is at the very bottom of every index that I can think of. Right? The last time I checked, I stopped looking at because it's too depressing. But the last time I looked at this, we were ranked at the very bottom of a corruption index. We're the poorest since the oil dried up. You would think a country like that, if you really were someone with the well-being of South Sudan, or with the interests of South Sudan at heart, you need all the help you can get. And your educated people that understand the modern complex economy that we live in, the modern complex politics of, what is happening right now in the world geopolitically. I would think those people are useful. And to characterize them as, politically incompetent, or that, I don't understand. I don't actually know what that word means, what that sentence means. Is it, and you would have to explain to me, is it that they don't know how to play politics? They don't know they don't see the big picture? What exactly does that mean? Since when did politics become an end? Since when is politics the goal of politicians? We elect leaders to serve us, to bring services, to steer, our developmental agenda. We don't elect leaders because they can play politics really well. And so if I've misunderstood that, my apologies. Please explain to me what you meant by that. But I thought, for someone that aspires to be a leader in our country, somebody who I have tremendous admiration for, Mabior is a really smart guy. Like, even though he doesn't have a PhD, he can run rings around people with PhDs. He's just that smart. Yeah. So it's baffling that he doesn't understand the value of it.
I need to make many things clear.
Mm-hmm.
Mabior is a smart person, as you said. He's brilliant. And one of the things I value about Mabior is he reads a lot. And that makes some of the things he says very grounded, very well thought out. That we cannot take away from Mabior. And anyone who undermines Mabior to say Mabior doesn't have this, I don't really agree with that. So Mabior, he's educated in my books. And I said that in the video. So that we cannot take away. The other thing we also need to make very clear is no one has ever said And I think people can correct me on that. No one has ever said that you need a PhD to go into politics. No one has ever said that. And if someone says that, we need to know that. Someone who says you need a PhD to go into politics. And I said in the video, you don't even need a degree. You need the consent of the people to vote you into office. So you don't need a PhD. Anyone who says that, I need to know who said that. So that has to be clear. As I said also in the video, the difference between academia and politics is apparent. So we cannot confuse that. It's just common sense that politics and academia are two different fields. So that's common sense. I don't think Mabior needs to tell anyone. So that's something we all know.
What
So what
I think is, you are an academic, by the way. Sorry to interrupt you, and you can elaborate on this.
Yeah.
You are an academic. You know what academia is. Academia is its own world. It has leadership, like you said. It has its own economy. You have college cities here that are their own thing, and the person running that is not his whole goal is not being published in peer reviewed journals. He's managing a whole economy there. So my apologies to interrupt you, but I wanted to clarify that. I think his understanding of what academia is seems insufficient, or it seems like a little bit, it doesn't cover.
Academia is like almost a government of its own. It has leaders. So if you look at the administration, even if you look at the University of Juba, you can see it has different schools, it has different leadership structures. So it's an industry of its own. So PhD is just a tiny part of it. You don't actually need a PhD to teach at university necessarily. It's a predominant degree, but you don't need it to teach. You can teach with a master's degree. And in the video, I did explain Sol Kripke.
Yeah.
Sol Kripke had only a bachelor's degree, but he taught a generation of PhDs and master's degree. And one of the books I mentioned is Naming a Necessity. So academia has different elements. So PhD is just one of them. So what I didn't quite understand from Mabior is why he said what he said. And maybe because he has a certain PhD he doesn't like and has offended him. And that's maybe the reason why he's saying that. And that's something he has to explain. But we can agree with Mabior. We don't need a PhD to go to politics. You don't need that. That's common sense. A PhD doesn't have the qualification for you to go into politics. But the question is, that's not what he said. What he said was PhD is not a qualification for politics. The question I was asking is, so what is? So there's no standard that qualifies you to go into politics. Maybe the consent of the people or patronage. Yeah. So go ahead.
Right.
Go ahead.
And I think it's a good point, because the way I've understood school in general, as we live in the developing world, school has two purposes. It's not just the knowledge that you gain from it. It's also a kind of a school, sort of a sorting mechanism for, let me put it this way, people that have PhDs that work in government generally don't use what they study. PhD is it seems like it's a very specialized field. If you were to be employed in South Sudan right now, I don't think what you publish your dissertation on, or what you're actually a specialist on, because outside of that field of the area of your dissertation and the general field you're in, political science, the more you move away from that, the less qualified you become. So it's a very specialized field. But what I think a PhD does, you can comment more on this later on, is it prepares you to think critically. When you encounter new information, you're able to process it. And I think based on the comments I've seen on Facebook so far, the people with PhDs have done a really good job of responding to this, a lot more than those of us without PhDs. We join a particular camp for whatever reason. But I remember reading a comment by a rebuttal by Daniel Akenyethiong to Mabior's apology. That was, it's the kind of analysis that when you read Mabior's apology, like me, if you're like me, you're like, oh, okay. He apologized, all good. But then later on, when somebody breaks you down the structure of the apology, so what I'm trying to say is that a PhD, we can already see benefits to it, because you can already see just by the way people that have it carry themselves. If they've earned it, legitimately, it adds something to that person. And I don't know if that's something you can easily dismiss. Can clarify what education about. I don't know what that means. Mr. Speaker did clarify what education about. Do you know what that person is trying to say? Or
I don't know what the question is about. But here's what I want to say about this.
That's okay.
Some people have used this to sort of say, as he said, Mabior said, that if you are secure in your PhD, then you shouldn't care about an opinion. Do you think he's right on that? An opinion. So because he's saying he's just expressing
Well,
his
no,
opinion on
no,
his
no, not
Facebook. So
well.
why are peers?
Yeah. So for me, that is
What is your thought on that?
if this was another time, I don't really know how to feel. I don't know. My initial reaction to that is no, of course, your opinion matters because you're a minister, right? But it seems like the game has completely changed in the last couple of years because we now have presidents and billionaires. The most powerful people in the world are battling it out on Facebook in the middle of the night, or on Twitter, what it used to be, or X, whatever it's called now. So I feel like I don't know if I'm at this point. I don't know if I can hold Mabior. My initial thought was, dude, you are a minister. You are a very important person. You've been given this power to work for our people. Maybe carry yourself with a bit of decorum, or measure the words that say. Be careful what you put out. Maybe get a press secretary to manage sort of the PR aspect of your job. But that has totally changed in the last decade or so. Trump tweets in the middle of the night, and so I'm less sure about what my opinion is on that particular issue. I would like to think that if I was in that role, that I would care about what I say a lot more than me just messing around on Facebook or whatever. So I know
But
my opinion
here's
on
the
that
issue.
is
Here's the issue. So here's the issue. Some people are saying Mabir was right. The question is about what? Because most of the things he said were common sense. That you don't need a PhD to go into politics. That is common sense. Everyone knows that. So and then people were saying, okay, why are PhDs really very emotional on this? PhDs analyze issues in society. We analyze things. So if someone, a politician, says something, we have to analyze that. So the more he talks, the more we analyze things. He gives
yeah.
us data. So what people rationalize as an emotional reaction is a response to a fallacy, to a fallacious statement. That's what we do. We analyze them. So my main problem is what you were saying. What is the implication for a politician, a national minister, to be able to say things like that? What if someone in Kenya, for example, or Uganda or Rwanda says a minister of environment and forestry is talking ill of people who have achieved that level of education in his country and he's in government? What would they think? That's the kind of thing I'm worried about. If a young person who
Yeah.
respects him hears him say things like that, what would they think? That someone I respect is saying something like this about a PhD. So why would I need a PhD? So going to politics doesn't need a
Okay.
PhD, but if you have a
Let me
PhD,
ask
it
you this.
doesn't hurt.
Right. Let me ask you this though, right? Because my main, that is a very valid point, that you are a reflection of, you represent us, in the age of the internet where everyone in other countries can see what you're saying. Someone, yes, in Uganda or Kenya or Rwanda might look at, what Mabior said and say, your country definitely needs PhDs. Why are you talking down on PhDs? Or why are you talking down on education? Because a PhD is sort of like, it's a terminal degree in that field. So there's the pinnacle of educational pursuit in that particular field. And if you are belittling it, you're essentially belittling education. So what that also means to me is, if you are ever in a position of power, you are gonna you seem to have indicated that you don't value expertise, and the field you're in is very science intensive, the ministry that you hold. What role does expertise play in your overall agenda? Like, do you need experts? What qualifications should those experts have? So I don't, and that's why I go back to what I don't know what he meant by political competence in that sense.
But here's what is interesting. Mabior actually values this expertise. He actually values. I do believe he values them. He has them in the ministry, so he uses them. I do believe he values them. But he was making a comment on social media where it is not. There's no an editorial input. There's no there's no individual to tell you this is wrong or don't
Right.
write that. So that's what he thought he was doing. His mistake is that he's not just Mabior Garang like any average Nyoka or Galwak in Konya Konya. No, he's no longer that kind of Mabior. That's one of the things he
Right.
doesn't understand. He commands a large following. He has a political position where he should be accountable for whatever he says, but he doesn't see himself that way. Well, it's just my opinion. Why should you care? That's how he sees it. But no, he's not just like that. What he says matters, and it has
Yeah.
implications. So that's maybe one of the things he doesn't see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go
The
ahead.
other thing I thought about, no, I completely agree with that. The other thing I thought about was that just the larger, discussion about what type of society do we want. When I see Deng Jr. stand up there and challenge, and basically, hold his own with establishment politicians that are within that establishment in Juba. I'm proud of that. I want to see a country. I wish we could have a country, sort of what Thomas Jefferson calls a meritocracy of talent. Like where we should aspire for that. And if we start to see that our leadership, is beginning, as we're seeing now, putting their children in positions of power and so whatnot, and sort of like stacking, sort of like, turning what should be accessible to everyone who's qualified into family, businesses, family dynasties, whatever. I think that is very demoralizing to most people. I would like to think that my ideal idea of leadership is a leadership that strives to create an environment where a child of nobody in a place like Akobo or whatever can rise up, with the right, through school, through hard work. It goes back to the point I was saying earlier. Education is really more than what the content that you consume or you take in. It's a sorting mechanism. It's a levels the playing field a little bit. And in societies where there's very high social mobility, we've seen we see the value of that. The kids that started, Steve Jobs was an orphan kid in California that started this big company. Like Elon Musk, whatever you think of him, came from South Africa as an immigrant. He claims without money in his pocket, without any help from his father, and rose up to become the person that he is right now. Meritocracy, leadership should really strive to they should really try to create a meritocratic society if they can, because it ends up lifting all. It's that saying, that tide that lifts up all boats. But that is undermined, in my opinion, by when we see people that we look up to denigrate, achievement, especially achievement by the people by the children of I don't want to say nobodies, but the children of outside of that elite circle that they come in. People like Deng Jr. should be that are, he doesn't have the name recognition that Mabior Garang has. We should celebrate that. We should celebrate that because it shows that in our society you can rise up. I mean, he is the leader of a youth organization. He's not really within the mainstream politics of the country, but it says something that he can come and have a conversation with the government officials and push back. He feels that he owns that podium, that places in enough to be able to criticize, even if it was, in fact, he wasn't really criticizing, he was joking, but he should be allowed to do that. And it shouldn't create the sort of fallout that it created from, when I listened to what he said and the responses that followed, I feel like there was an overreaction, because what he said and what the responses that happened afterward were not really,
I think
it didn't fit. I feel like people read too much into what he said.
I think that there's
So
a
go ahead.
backstory to that. There's a backstory to why, there's a backstory as to why Mabior responded that way. So I don't really agree sometimes with some of the things Deng Juna says. So he sometimes says things that are not appropriate. But what he said on that occasion, I don't think it was that controversial. He didn't talk about qualifications. He didn't say anything. He was just saying
Yeah,
that the children of government officials,
I had to
are
listen
being
to it
given
twice
these
before I
positions.
came
How
on
about
here to
us?
make sure I wasn't missing anything.
Yeah. How about how about us? So that's one of the things he said. So he didn't say anything about the fact that Mabior is not qualified. I don't think I say Mabior is not qualified. I've never said that. So the only thing we can say is, if people are appointed, what is the system? And there's no system where people can say there's a meritocratic system that is put in place where we say, okay, here are the candidates and this is how we are selecting them. We don't have that kind of a system. But I wouldn't say Mabior is not qualified. So I cannot say that. I am really disappointed that it was said at a funeral service.
No,
That's
yeah,
why I'm
yeah,
disappointed. But I want to come back
yeah.
to
That's the other
what this
sad thing here,
means
because
in terms.
yeah.
Go ahead.
But I think there's a lag that where, I'm getting what you say a little bit later. And so by the time I respond, I don't know how we can, if there's any way to get around that, but it's very disruptive.
I can hear you well. So you cannot hear me,
Can,
because
can
I
you
can
hear
hear
me?
you well. So I don't know why.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I can
Okay.
hear you,
How
but
about
when
people
I
are
look at the
watching?
video, there's a lot, it seems like even yeah. Can you guys, are you guys able to hear us okay?
Those watching.
Is the public chat on this app the same as what's on Facebook, or?
Yeah. So I can see some comments here, but I didn't see anyone say they should, if they were not hearing
Okay.
you, they could have said it.
Yeah,
All
all
right.
yeah, if they
Yeah.
couldn't,
Go ahead. Go
hear
ahead.
it, they would have said something.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I don't even know what I was trying to say. I've lost my train of thought. But there's only delay in voicing. I'm just looking at the comments right now. So there is a delay in voicing because I'm hearing you a little later than when you talk.
Oh, okay.
But it's okay. Let's keep
Okay.
going. If
I'm not sure
we're
why.
doing okay so far, it hasn't completely collapsed. So yeah, my I mean,
Okay, let
I
me ask
really
a
don't know
question. What is
what
the
to say
problem
about
with
this.
this? Is there a problem?
The problem is
What to say
in
about?
my problem with it is what I told you. I think if he doesn't, if it's yeah, both of you, if it doesn't value, let me take off this chat. It's very distracting to me. If the issue is that he doesn't value PhDs, which you sort of rebutted that he does actually value PhDs, and that maybe this was a case of him sort of texting something or posting something without really thinking about it, and then trying to deal or trying to contain the fallout afterwards. Maybe that's the case. If the issue is that he actually has an issue with expertise and higher education, then that's a problem, because the country you're trying to build in the 21st century, we're going into a knowledge economy. With AI nowadays taking away sort of entry level jobs and stuff like that, the only countries that survive in the century we're going into, are countries that value knowledge based, that have that train their people to participate in the global knowledge economy. Let me go back to why I'm somebody coming from a background of sciences. I don't know what it looks like in 30 years when AI, when artificial intelligence is able to do a lot of the menial jobs that human beings do. What is your game plan there? Are if you become the president of South Sudan right now, how are you going to develop this economy if you do not lean into human capital development, if you do not lean into education, science, and technology, and those things, which require research is a big part of it. A lot of the things that we enjoy right now came out of R&D from private sector, government funded R&D. It's the wealth that the Western countries have is a direct product of their investment in higher education. And if you look at that list I was telling you earlier about which countries, the ratio of PhD to the general population and other economic indicators, there's a very strong correlation there because it's a valuable thing. So I hope Mabior values that and has a plan. If because these guys, whether we like it or not, he comes with name recognition, and he is going to be a formidable political player, whether we like it or not, because he's interested in it. He wants to be a politician, and he has a strong following. So he's going to be in politics. So what
I
does
think what
he's
one
the reason we're
he
talking
does value.
about him as opposed to somebody else is then if you do value it, come out clearly and say, I misspoke. It's okay. We want people, we want leaders that are able to be accountable, to be able to own the mistakes. I misspoke. It's not what I meant, and X, Y, and Z. But the one apology I saw seemed a little bit sort of like almost condescending,
It
almost
wasn't
like
an apology.
forced. And, anyway, it wasn't an apology. It really wasn't. And
I want to
if that
I
is your
want to
position,
believe that
defend us. Come on this show and talk to Kurthi and answer questions directly from South Sudanese, and let us hear what you actually think about this.
So I want to believe that
Yeah, go
Mabior
ahead. Go ahead.
values what you just said. He values research. He actually said those things. He values them. He actually posted a picture of a PhD that he wants to work with. So he does value this. Here's the problem. He has politicized the issue of PhD. He has personalized it. So when we say something, he doesn't see it as constructive. He see it as a slight. So that is where his problem. And he has a problem with particular PhDs, but he cannot say their names. Otherwise, it comes out personal. So he generalizes that.
Mm.
That's where he messes up. But I don't think Mabior devalues education. He has mixed personal issues with national issues, and that is where he has
Yeah,
to be really clear. He hasn't apologized. He's talking about
yeah.
mischief. He's
If
talking
I'm going
about, he
to
still stands by
let
it.
me, like I said, yeah, like I said earlier, I really, I'm a big fan. I'm still a big fan of Mabior Garang. I used to, as you can, I don't know if people can see my profile picture. I have the picture of John Garang because it's someone I hold in such high esteem. And Mabior was actually really kind to me when I remember I was on Twitter once. I was talking, I messaged him on Twitter once and asked him a question about like history. We kind of had a period where I was really into sort of like ancient Sudanese history. And that is something that he really enjoys. And you can tell that this is somebody that's read extensively about this because I thought I had done a lot of research into this. And, I interacted with him briefly and he knew a lot more than so he's a smart guy. He's a very smart guy. Maybe the issue that he has is we also have a society that has our society, and this might seem contradictory to what I said initially. Our society, there might be people that talk down to him because he doesn't have a PhD, right? And maybe those are the people
Yeah.
he was talking about. and and like you said, he cannot come out and name them because it will seem petty, it will seem unnecessary. So he just threw a blanket, sort of insult at the entire class of people with PhDs, and that's a whole different thing. I think his frustration, if that is the case, is legitimate. It's very. I don't like those type of people as well. People that overemphasize their certificates for like an appeal, like for any opinion of you have, I have a PhD, so you must listen to me type of thing, like an appeal to authority type of thing. Those people are annoying. Everyone knows they're annoying. And if that's what he was thinking about, he should clarify that and say, certain PhDs that use their diploma without, bringing any fresh ideas, those are the people I was talking about. I would welcome that.
Okay, see,
Mabior was not speaking only about
Someone
PhDs. He was
saying,
referring to all academic fields of
that's
study,
not true.
including bachelor's, master's, and PhD. Yeah.
No, that was the later comment, but the first comment
That is not
was
true.
very
I
specific.
don't think. I think it was specifically talking.
Yeah, it was very specific. So this comment is not
Yeah,
it's not true.
yeah. And it actually lends. I think it supports your opinion that he must have been thinking about a particular person when he wrote that initial comment, and then it's sort of like walking it back. He just sort of dug in more, and that just made things worse from there.
Here's the thing about what I said about politicizing something.
All right.
If I say Bior belongs to a certain political party and he says something, I acknowledge that what he's saying is true, but I'm not going to accept it because it will compromise my position within the party to which I belong. So he's going to insist on what he said, even if he knows that is wrong, because of partisanship. So that is one element. The other element is personalizing it. So as you said, there are some people who laud their PhDs over him. And he's justified in getting angry. He's justified. I would agree with him, but not in the way he said it. So he's going to insist that he's right, even if he knows he's wrong, because that is personal. That is very emotional for him. In that case, I understand. But who are those people? Because I would stand with him. If someone says your PhD actually gives you some advantage in politics, that would be wrong completely. And that is wrong. So, but he's not very, very clear on what he's trying to say. So I do agree with him on some cases if some people are lauding. But we Junubin, we know South Sudanese. There are some people who would say they have PhD, so they have to be ministers, or Mabior doesn't have these and is a minister, so I should be like this. So people like that may exist.
Yeah, and that is it's a very interesting point, honestly, because there's a lot of that. It's not that is not coming out of nowhere. It's coming from, we've seen a lot of people that earn masters and PhDs as sort of like a to use as a stepping stone into government appointments or whatever. They think of it as, I have a PhD now, you should hire me. That doesn't work in South Sudan. I haven't seen where, to the extent that the regime or the administrative government has employed, I've not seen the PhD as a requirement to many of the roles that I see. There are people that that need to have PhDs. Yeah. If you're going to be the central bank governor, you sort of need to understand economics. So maybe you do need to have a PhD. And I don't actually know if they've always all had PhDs. Central bank governor. Yeah. If you are going to be, besides that, I don't really see where PhDs are. I don't see where PhDs are sort of a requirement in the government of South Sudan. We don't really know the mechanism behind appointments in South Sudan. A lot of it seems to be, from my understanding, is lobbying, is people lobbying for positions. And maybe a certain group of lobbyists, if you can call them that, brings forth someone with a PhD to represent them and says, bang, here's our guy. This guy is very smart. Take him. He has a PhD. Maybe in that sense, the PhD matters, but I've never seen it actually, by itself. If we were to go by who are the most qualified people based on their education, those people are not in government. They're not. So clearly, I don't know where this resentment towards intellectualism or whatever, it's not just Mabior. I've actually seen this a lot. Even here in the US, you find that people are, I've seen situations where people insult people with PhDs because there's not a commensurate financial gain to it. Like among our community here, you'll find somebody without an educational background says maybe they have some little business that is doing well, and so that's a whole other, I don't know, this is probably different from that, but there seems to be a rising resentment of intellect in our community. I don't know where it's coming from, because I've always thought that we really valued education as a people. We valued knowledge. It seems to be a very defining sort of characteristic of Nilotic society is that people love knowledgeable, intellectual type of people, and that's why you see people sort of like wherever they go, they aspire to higher and higher degree. They try to get as many degrees as possible because that's really valued. But there is, maybe because of the economy in Juba, we've seen a situation where people without any qualifications are doing better because they're getting contracts or whatever, and it has created it's creating a sort of a new, uh, it's creating a very weird dynamic where you begin to get a class of well-to-do people that are not as highly educated, that they feel that PhDs are trying to take away their newfound glory or shine or whatever. And so there seems to be like I'm just spitballing here. I don't know. I've just noticed a rise in anti-intellectualism in a society that I know valued education. Everyone came to the US and said the first thing we did was go to university. We all wanted to get degrees. We didn't. Everyone tried to, like as many people as I remember. So where is this new anti-intellectualism coming from? So Mabior touches on a topic that's really important, right? And as we try to build a country, that the country we're trying to build should really need to emphasize work, competence, hard work, competence, merit. That if you're ever going to get this country to grow, you cannot just give people jobs willy-nilly who cannot do the job because they are your relative. We need to establish systems that if we ever get a new government that is more willing to, that is more conscious of what meritocracy is, why meritocracy is important, we should devise systems that really penalize favoritism, nepotism, things like that. Because yeah, it's great if your uncle or father it's great for you, that person who has an uncle or father or whatever in a position of power. But the net effect for the whole country is, find that the most important positions are full of mediocrity. There won't be any growth. There's downstream effects of that gain that you're getting from, meritocracy, from your uncles appointing you, from people bringing people from their clan or their section into positions. It is it's the sort of mess that you see in African countries where there's no growth because you're not rewarding merit, you're not rewarding work and hard work, you're not putting people of talent in positions where they need to be. Anyways, I'll let you respond to that while I go get a charger.
All right. So I think that a number of things I want to say regarding the controversy. The first thing is no one is against Mabior. So I think one of the things we want to do is we want to make Mabior a better leader. We know what our uncles in the SPLM do. They are intolerant. They don't like to be criticized because they were military men. They were men who only took orders from people who were superior to them. So that we understand. But when younger people like Mabior adopt that attitude, that makes me really sad because we want them to be responsive. We want them to be people who would say, okay, Quir, you've said this, it is not true, and here's why. As opposed to saying, okay, you're saying this because you're a PhD and you're very emotional and you're insecure in your PhD. That's not the kind of society we want to build. We want a society where we disagree. And I think we want Mabior to succeed. I want Mabior to succeed because my state is always flooded. And I want him to succeed, to use the money he gets to develop the state, to develop South Sudan, other states that are flooded. And we have many environmental issues. So I want him to succeed. So no one is against Mabior. The other thing we want to be clear about, you don't need a PhD to go into politics. You don't. You may need a technical PhD in some elements. For example, his ministry, he may need some technical PhDs, people who are skilled in environmental issues and public health. So technocrats, and he did talk about that. That's why I think Mabior still values PhD. He has only let his emotion get in the way. But I think he does value a PhD. So you don't need a PhD to go in politics. That we know. That's common sense. We also know that academia and politics are different. They are just related because you need academia to inform policies. Because in every ministry, you need people who are skilled in some fields to be able to inform policies. Otherwise, your policies will not be informed. So you need experts, economic experts, for example, health experts, to be able to tell you, or foreign policy experts who are skilled in some areas of the world to be able to inform policy. So academia and politics are intertwined. But just because you have a PhD doesn't mean it automatically qualifies you to go into political office. That's not true. And I'm not sure any PhD can say that. Not at all. And something I said at the beginning, that what Mabior needs to understand is when you are a public figure, a public servant, what you say matters. It matters a lot to many people. People who look up to him, I respect him, and I said this many times. But there are people who have assumed fandom They are no longer audience, because there's a difference between an audience and a fan. A fan doesn't question what that person, does. They support whatever that person says. But if you are an audience can be critical of the person they admire. So you can attend a lecture of someone you admire, but if they say something you don't like, you can question them. Fans do not do that. Fans, they just hail that person. And that is really, really risky for a politician to have fans. And I've seen this on Facebook where people are saying, Mabior is right. About what? Really? About saying that you don't need a PhD to go for politics? What is he right about? Most of the things he says are common sense that we know. So people are not very clear. But they say Mabior is right, not because he's right, but because of what I said earlier, partisanship. They see him as belonging to a camp they admire. So that's why they say. But right about what? He's saying common sense things, like, for example, if you finish law school, you cannot just automatically become a lawyer. If you finish an engineering school, you don't become an engineer automatically. I know friends of mine, colleagues of mine, who finished engineering school, but they could not write Peng until they are inducted. So it takes a process. So those things are things we all know. So I'm not sure whether Mabior telling us those things tells us anything new. He either takes us for fools, or he believes we don't know those things and he knows them, which is also very risky. There are some things, when people say Mabior is right, I'm not sure he's right. There's some people who say, oh, Mabior is more informed than PhDs. That may be true. Bior knows that I said that in the video I posted. Some of you may have watched it. I said there's some PhDs who don't read a lot. I know them. I've interacted with them. So there are some people who have bachelor's degree or even high school diplomas who are more informed than PhDs. That is true. I know people like that. They don't read. They only finish their dissertation, and that is it, because they wanted the title. They were not interested in knowledge. So there are many cases in which we can agree with Mabior. The problem is how he approached it. His approach was really destructive. It was ill-informed, and it's not a way a politician, a public figure should speak. So these are things I wanted to speak. Biori just came out. I was talking about.
Yeah, I think my computer dropped me, so I'm on my phone.
Yeah.
Is it clear?
Yeah, it's clear now. So I was talking about when people say Mabir was right. I didn't know what they mean by he was right. Was he right about that you don't need a PhD to go into politics? Then we all know that. That's common sense. I agree with it. Other PhDs agree with it. So when they say he was right, I don't know what he's talking about. If they say Mabir knows more about some issues than a PhD, that may be true because we don't know. Most of us have not sat with Mabir. We only see what he writes, his interviews, but he has not actually fielded questions. He has not sat with people to be critical of what he's saying. For example, to answer questions about what he was saying. And he can actually show us whether what he's saying is not choreographed, because some politicians, they talk behind closed doors, they get prepared, so and then they also ask for questions in advance. So when they respond to questions they already know. I don't do that here. Right. I only give you topics. I don't give you questions. So what you say depends on what you know. Right. So if he comes here, I can invite audience to the studio to ask questions, or we can address the questions being asked here. So I wanted to clarify some things about why we do this. Mabior is a public figure. Everything he says, every statement should be scrutinized by every South Sudanese because he's a public servant. And as I said, he's not just your average Ding or Galwak or Nyoka in Konya Konya. No, right. He's not just because he's Mabior Garang. No, he's a minister, a national minister. And that means a lot. It should mean a lot. And he should understand that. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. Absolutely. I mean, I agree with that wholeheartedly. And I think part of the why I was a little bit hesitant earlier to basically to criticize him on the post itself, unlike other politicians, he's actually engaging with people. We don't have that in South Sudan. That's the problem. We don't know what people are thinking. You assume there's just a lot of people writing on liberation repetitions, a lot of people writing on clan, tribal sort of allegiance and reputation. Nobody really knows what these people think, if they have any opinions on policies. And I want to, I sort of don't want to dunk on someone that is making an effort to engage with people, and he does that very well. He did that a lot on TikTok. Not TikTok. What's it called? Twitter.
And he does it on Facebook. He has a huge following. He doesn't filter. That's sort of like as much as we hate that from people occupying positions of consequence, positions where their words matter. This is something admirable about that. Somebody that just was, you kind of want to feel like this guy was riding the train and he just posted this, and that's really what he thinks. It's not something submitted through his press office. It's not something vetted by legal or whatever. It's just it's pure and like varnished like truth, or like this the way they see it. That's admirable. Um, I really, I encourage him to come on to interact with people a lot. What I, what you'll find, and based on we have been following him for a long time because since he immersed in the political scene for the simple reason that he's the son of John Garang and people care what he wants to do. I like to say, unlike other people, he just automatically attracts an audience, or automatically a following by just virtue of who. So he really should continue to make an effort to make himself available to people, and maybe even redefine what it means to live in the 21st century, in the age of Facebook Live and TikTok and all those things. There's no reason for politicians to hide behind their offices and press secretaries. Engage with people. Let us hear what you have. Just my 2 cents on that. So I wanted to come.
Yeah. Someone asked if I invited. Yes, I did invite Honorable Mabior before he became the Minister of Environment. I did invite him, and I was interested in talking to him about the SPLM New Sudan vision. But he did not respond. I'm not sure whether he saw the message or not, but he's welcome anytime because I want to talk to him about environmental policies, especially the issue of flooding and also the pollution from oil. So I want to talk to him about this. And as you said, we need to give him some credit. He engages. So the only thing he needs to do is to modify how he engages with people so that it doesn't come out as condescending. And sometimes he's condescending, and condescending because of what? If he's condescending to people because he's a son of a liberation icon, then he should not complain about PhDs who look down on him. So if PhDs are looking down on him and he's looking down on him on other people, then he has no argument. But that's what one of the things I'm saying, that he should be humble as a leader. He has a position now. He's not just the average Mabior.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one of the things we need to stress. So, but yes, he engages. That is a quality of a leader.
Yeah.
And he can improve on that. Many South Sudanese do not do that, and South Sudan, especially our SPLM uncle, see themselves as too big to respond to people. I remember a few years ago, 2012, I wrote an article, and I was critical of Dr. Lama Kol and Dr. Riek Machar. Lama Kol responded to my article. People were really surprised. But it's a quality of a leader to be able to engage with people. Mm-hmm. So that's a credit. That's a credit to Mabior.
Yeah, and there's a couple of them, honestly, that I think will fare as we have greater and greater internet penetration in South Sudan, where the average person will have the internet penetration rates, or the sort of access to in developing countries. It's only going to get better, and this is the new platform where people are, and and so I really admire people that are, like you said, Lama Kol used to be on, like, interacting with people, like, is just like one of the regular people there. Majanga God used to be on Twitter. I don't know if he still is. I haven't been on Twitter in a while. And so this, I encourage those guys to continue doing that, because one thing you cannot hide behind. You cannot hide behind this sort of, I don't know, stake of, like, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for. Like, you cannot ride on your reputation and just hide from from the. That is never going. That's not going. And Trump has shown us, by the way, learn something from Donald Trump, whoever you are. That the more you flood the zone, like, people will not care about what the one thing they. But if you only talk on the internet once every 3, that one thing that you say defines you. But if you are engaging with people constantly, and we will see your sense, we'll get a more complete picture of who you are. It can only work out better. So I would, I think for the SPLM uncles that sort of like took that step and and joined us in the 21st century in the media, in the mediums that we, or the media that we interact in. Kudos to you. Continue doing that. I have a feeling you are going to have an edge over your people that are behind their reputations and their.
Yeah. So let's respond to this from Matud Benjamin. This is part of the misconception that people have. Why PhD people are painful about the statement from Minister Mabior Garang Mabior. Being PhDs doesn't qualify them to be politician, and many South Sudanese PhD have committed crimes. See, no
What?
one. We have already discussed this.
Yeah.
No one is saying it qualifies you. We've already said
Yeah.
that, and we are not. It's not. We're not saying. It's not painful for us to hear that.
Can someone define for me what you mean by qualifies you to be a politician? What is the qualification for a politician? Is it accidents of birth, like these guys that are appointed right now? Because all they have is an accident of birth. They just happen to be born to. I don't want to bring people into this. It's hard to talk about it without talking about it. But they're public figures, so hopefully they can handle it. Being a Tonkwalma, as much as she wants to distance herself from that, that's accidental. You didn't. I'm not gonna go there. What qualifies people for politics? In the minds of, when I keep hearing that they're not qualified for politics, what do you mean by that? What qualifies someone for politics? Is politics? You guys in South Sudan, people have this idea, like leadership and stuff can be a bug. No society in the world that has done holds that it's anti. When you had what's the word for when kept leadership and when monarchies passed leadership, whatever, down to it was the most stagnant period in human history. Nobody did it. When those people left Europe and came to America, they were like the poorest people. They were like the persecuted people. The most powerful country in the world, and in the New World, Canada, Australia. Canada was populated by criminals, But one thing they had is that they did not have that hang up about, about birthright and heritage and all the nonsense. You came out here and you made something for you. And what do you know? Both societies are the ones. So, I'm going to ask you, where do you think this comes from? We are supposed to be this selfless, egalitarian society. This thing I have an echo.
No, I cannot hear an echo. Yeah. But here's what I want to say about this. I think there's a narrative that has been built, and that narrative is that PhD people are really very, very emotional. So they cannot take what people say. Some PhDs are not well educated. They don't know what they're talking about. So it seems to give people some sort of edification to be able to denigrate PhDs. But at a deeper level, if you actually sit with someone and talk to them about PhD, you will realize they actually value the PhD.
Yeah.
Maybe someone doesn't like Kuir, and when it comes to PhD and Kuir, then it pisses someone off.
Yeah.
But when it comes to PhD and someone else they respect, they will value that PhD. So it's about how people are categorized. So
Yeah.
someone will value some PhDs because they belong to people they respect.
Yeah.
Part of how our society has been structured is part of the partisanship we've built. For example, he's saying, we're not painful, we are analysts. So when you say a statement, we subject it to analysis. That's what we do. So every time a Bior is going to say something, we'll analyze it, we'll subject it to analysis. And so it's not about being painful. If we feel it's fallacious, then we'll address it. If we feel it's something that is positive, then we'll accept it. So it's not about being emotional or something like that. No. And we've said this. PhD is not a quality. It's not a necessary condition for you to be in politics. It doesn't. But if you have it, it cannot disqualify you to go in politics. But if you have it, you cannot say, "Oh, I have a PhD, so now I'm going to be a minister." No, that's also would be foolhardy. It would be foolhardy. So these are things we're telling people.
Now, all things being equal, if I had two candidates in front of me, one with a PhD and one without, and I interviewed them and they all seem like, very charismatic, charming people. That PhD ad, the other person, what it's not the knowledge they know. They could be an entomologist. I don't care about, but the fact that they completed, a rigorous academic program, stuck on the next level of expertise on something means that I could, whatever that is, I can apply it to whatever job that they have. Take on a job and be able to apply that stuff. Just apart from what they learn, it's also what it shows about. There's a lot of other things that we can just discern. The fact that somebody has a PhD, resilience, tenacity, things like. I think you do our country, our younger people a disservice when you dent, achievement. Let me just put it that way.
And also, when we talk about politics, one of you was saying is because we have micro politics, we have also macro politics. So micro politics deal with localized relationships. So relationship in small communities between individuals. That's also politics when it comes to power. So most of the time, politics is not it's not just about government. When you talk about government, when you talk about global relations, that is macro politics. But micro politics in terms of relations, for example, what he's doing now is micro politics. And
Okay.
for those of you who know about feminist theory, feminists have a different definition of what politics is. There's this statement, and you can Google it. Those of you who are watching, that the personal is political. So the personal is political. That is something feminists say. There's something that happens between you and I. We may say it has nothing to do with politics. It is just personal. But if it relates to power, your power over me or my power over you, that is political because it has ramifications in society. So what Mabior was saying is macro politics and not micro politics. So when he says politics, it wasn't really clear. In academia, we tend to be very pedantic. We tend to look for clarities. When
Mm.
someone says something, we need you to be clear as to what you mean. So when he says politics, did he mean micro politics or macro politics? But I think he meant macro politics about the state, about government. But politics can also be interpersonal in terms of micro politics. But we don't want to be that pedantic in terms of these issues. So the other thing which I want to stress, and that's why I don't really take people who say Mabior was right, and I say right about what. But in terms of in group, which sociologists and anthropologists talk about in group bias, you only pick on what you want to be true. So you only want what someone you like, even if they say something fallacious, something
Yeah.
that is erroneous,
Yeah.
you will stick with it even if you know consciously that it is wrong, because that is your camp, that is your in group. Out group, you don't really care about what they say. So if Kuirth Garang says something, even if I know deep in my heart that this is true, I cannot accept it. A few years ago, a young man sent me a message in inbox. It was about the coup, the so-called coup in 2013.
Okay.
So he told me in private that I know there's no coup, but when he goes out to make comments publicly, he says there was a coup. But in private, it's telling me that I know there was no
Yeah.
coup. Why? Because there's a public image he wants to maintain for his in group.
For him.
So when I see people writing and commenting that Mabior was right, that is part of what I think. It's just an in-group thinking. It's not because they don't know that what Mabior was saying was destructive, not just yeah.
What are the two groups? What is the in group? Was the out group? I not
Okay. So the in group, because there's some people who see Mabior as part of as one in group is part of SPLMIG. So
Okay.
he's part of government. So people who are opposed to the government would see themselves as out group. So if you criticize Mabior, you are rationalized as against the government
Okay.
of Kirmayadit, as against SPLM-IG. So unless if you are someone who subscribed to the ideal of SPLM-IG, then you would be an in group. Otherwise, you are an out group.
Yeah.
When I was talking to Nialan Majak, when he was saying, anytime you criticize the government, you are characterized as a rebel. So you are, we say that you are othered. So this is what we call othering.
Right.
So the more you put someone outside your in group, you are othering that person. So that's what people do when they see Mabior. They see Mabior as belonging to their camp, whatever that camp is, and then they other the other people. And
Yeah.
whatever the other people say is wrong because they belong to the other camp.
Yeah. This would be an interesting experiment to run if I had a time machine, because the camp is in now is not the camp it was in a couple of years ago, right? But we don't have a time machine. We don't know what this would have played like if it stayed while on the other side. What role do you think? There's a question I asked earlier that I'm trying to also understand. We seem to, I mean, anthropologists describe our society as this sort of like, we're very decentralized. Every man is the king in his family type of thing. But something has changed over the last, maybe the 20th century into like now. It seems like we really hold people. There's almost like a hereditary power that people have. Like, Mabior is a bad example, maybe because it's already but like there is a lot of this where we expect people born to powerful people to sort of maintain that title, almost like some like a dukeship or something from medieval.
what could have happened there, or what do you have any thoughts on that? Why? What shifted? Why were we the way we were pre-colonially? And was what could have actually led to that sort of decentralized political system that is not that is completely that is changed to the point now we're becoming increasingly sort of like we have classes of people. We have the SPLA and
It's a difficult question, but we have classes that have developed based on the contribution to the liberation struggle. So those who contributed to the liberation struggle, they have credentials that people respect automatically. They don't have to do anything. So if I say, for example, Alewa Yang, Kwalamanyan, Majang God, or Thomas Cirillo, these people have earned that sort of credential because they fought during the liberation struggle. That is seen as a level of respect. We also have the ethnic dimension. There are people who are respected because they belong to a certain group, ethnic
right.
group. So that is another dimension of how people have characterized themselves.
Mhm.
Then there's also an issue of money. If you work in government, people respect you not because you're a good person, but because you can easily give me access to power and resources. So I'm going to respect you because you can easily connect me. So these are levels in which people have characterized themselves in South Sudan. So Mabior can give people access to resources. Mabior has that liberation credentials through his father. Yeah.
Okay.
So some people, and also he belongs. He's now gone back to SPLMIG. He was part of SPLMIO, then he left, but he's now part of SPLMIG. So some people respect Mabior because of the father. They may respect him because he can give people access. They may also respect him because of the ethnic group to which he belongs. For example, I don't know whether I should raise this, but it is something that is controversial. But within the Jing within Jonglei, let's say Bor, Twi, Nyarwing, and all, there's that controversy about Greater Bor. There's so many people who don't like the concept, the people who embrace it. Mabior comes out as someone who embraces it. So people who subscribe to this concept of Greater Bor would see him as part of their in group. So whatever he says, they would embrace it because he supports what they like. Even if they know what he's saying is wrong, they will value that. So there are different elements playing out here where people will relate to Mabior based on what they want. And in fact, there are people, and I'm not sure whether I'm making the assumption. There may be people, not all of them. There may be relatives who get slighted when Mabior is criticized. So you can see this is a complex issue, but that's why I don't get mad at people who make really derogatory comments or they write ridiculous articles saying Mabior is right when they don't specify, but because they want to slight people who maybe support Greater Bor or they support SPLM or they are Jing, whatever dimension or index of differentiation they want to use to divide people. I don't get mad at them because that's the prism through which they see things. I don't want to be too academic, but sometimes it's good to bring up these issues. Some of you may know Edward Said. He was a Palestinian American intellectual. He's written many well-known books. He's the one who wrote about Orientalism. There's another book I'm reading now called Culture and Imperialism. So in Culture and Imperialism, what he's saying is the novels that were written during the imperial era, which people call the Victorian era, because Queen Victoria was the Queen of England during the imperial era. So there were novels written at that time. Those novels made references to the empire and the colonies in Africa, in India, and in the Americas. When I say the Americas, it's North America, Central America. Yeah, so that's what we say the Americas. In books, if you see the Americas, it's North America, Central America, and South America. So the novels made references to the empire. So he's saying the novels were informed by what was happening within the empire, the British Empire. Now, if you come to people who analyze literature, what they will take from these books is not what the empire has done to the colonized. They will not talk about police brutality. They will not talk about land dispossession. They will only talk about the greatness of the empire, about the greatness of the British Empire. Those who are colonized will not talk about the greatness of the empire. They will talk about brutality. So, but when people look at these things, they will approach it from their perspective. The colonized will look at it differently. The imperial will look at it differently. It's the same thing here. So the camps will look at this issue differently based on where they come from. So I'm not going to pretend I'm going to convince anyone. That will be foolhardy. What I can do is to explain my point of view. This is how I see things.
Right.
Whether you take it, if you say, Kuirth, you're wrong, come and explain it to me.
Yeah.
I'm going to explain my viewpoint. I'm not interested in convincing you necessarily. But that's how I see things, because people position themselves through prisms. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we all have that. Though. We all, we each. I have a different perspective than you because my perspective is informed by my experience. I only see things a certain. What is the point of discourse then? If we can never, if we're all just sort of like seeing things from our perspective, and on this that Victorian story, it still applies today. For the longest time, there was no representation in Hollywood because when they envisioned themselves as the people saving the world in like some post-apocalyptic future, it was like one token black guy and like 10 white people because in that, or in like some distant future when I watch a lot of sci-fi, and when I see like some projection of like human civilization like 100 or 1,000 years from now, it's like one black guy, maybe there's a token Asian, and then there's like white people, and that's because people have a difficulty inherently of putting themselves in other people's shoes or seeing things from another perspective. They can only see things.
I wanted to respond to what Dane Khamis is saying. The different Mabior was attacked directly by someone he knows, and he has the right to question his political stage. I don't even know what that means. So I don't know what that really means. But Mabior, I think when we see it as attack, it's not really. Let us not rationalize what we say as a critique of Mabior as attack. Let us see this as criticism or a critique of his position. And Mabior is entitled to responding. And I don't think Mabior should stop. What I suggest is Mabior modifying how he approaches the public because he's a public figure. But I don't suggest Mabior stopping. And I don't think he's going to stop. So it is just how he says. So these are not attacks. These are things that are normal in a democratic society. We should encourage them, that politicians should be criticized and they should respond accordingly. It's part of transparency. So when I say we can shape Mabior into a better politician, that's what I'm saying. He says something, we critique what he's saying, he looks at it and he says, Kuirth, you've said this is wrong, that's not what I said, and he can explain. When Mabior said that his message was distorted, that's not true because the message is very clear. There was no distortion. And there's some people reading something that Mabior did not say into what Mabior meant. We critique what he said. We don't critique what he thought or what he intended to say that he did not say. So we are not going to read his mind. If he says something and say, okay, I misspoke, and then this is what I meant to write, then he's going to write that. He did not apologize. It was just being condescending. I don't think Mabior apologized because he says that, oh, if you are securing your PhD, you shouldn't get offended. I'm not offended. I'm disappointed. I'm not offended. I'm just disappointed. So I wouldn't be and also, yeah. So it doesn't take away anything from.
Yeah, I don't know what that. What does it mean? Okay, let me narrate. There's an incident that happened when Mabior was first appointed to the cabinet. I want to say that's where he walked into a cabinet meeting with a bow tie or something that President Kiir didn't like.
Oh.
And Kiir kicked him out of the cabinet meeting. And at some, I think as leaders, you kind of have to. When do you sort of put yourself or what you we appreciate that you want to be authentic. This is how you do this. But at what point does that sort of negate your overall objective or your duty to people? Like it's paradoxical that the public wants you to be the man of the people. You want us to, but we all then becomes a little too eccentric. It's a little uncomfortable. I'm bringing this up because my opinion, bro, just be the blandest politician you can. If you are saying, if express yourself a little too authentically, if you're being a little too eccentric, and you are setting where these are old conservative men that don't, it undermines what you're trying to do at the end of the day. I'm going to tie this up to what we're talking about. If that's your opinion, that you know some PhDs that are just not, that are, as you call them, PhDs or whatever, right? That are just not the paper that the diploma is printed on, and you know that you have total disdain for those. But you've seen the fallout of what your words, because your words are, they might mean something completely. You've seen how they're interpreted. Maybe retract them or clarify them without coming off as content. When you dig in and try to mock people with a sort of a misdirection apology type of thing, it betrays like a lack of maturity. I didn't want to attack Mabior when I came onto this thing, but like you, I think Mabior will make an excellent leader. Like I really think, like he just has that sort of toughness that we want for this country. Somebody that it does what. But I'm like saying, tone that down a little bit, man. Just tone it down a little bit. Do what will make you navigate those holes and power, if you will. Because if you're doing things that are used to sideline you, you are useless to anyone. You're useless to people. For you to be useful, suck it up, eat your, like when you say something that people don't like, take it back or clarify it, or in that sense, play. I thought that was my understanding of what you're calling political competence, but it's not really showing here. That sort of like savviness is not really by your reaction. It seems very emotional. It seems very, like you're still fighting sort of battles with individuals that you probably have in mind that you're throwing, at the expense of your reputation as a leader, at the expense of what you represent, and someone that has the potential to become a very, important political player in our country.
One of the things our politicians need is they don't need yes men and women around them. They need people who will call them out when they say things that are fallacious, or if they want to go to the public and say something, they need to pass this through other people and say, okay, this is what I want to go and say. What do you think? How do you think it's going to be perceived by other people? And then they can modify the message. Most of these Western politicians, like Obama, you see Obama who speaks with eloquence, with so much clarity. That is not natural. He's coached.
Coach.
The speech is written, and then you practice with your people in the office. You then practice, and then they will give you feedback. And so our politicians in South Sudan think they're too grand, especially our uncles, and that's why I don't want Mabior to adapt this.
Yeah.
To adapt this attitude. So where they think what they know is the general truth, they don't really care how you take it. Mabior is of a different generation. Mabior is responsive, or he's going to be criticized by a different generation, a generation who is going to pick what he says line by line.
Yeah.
So
not to mention the Gen Z don't care about your lineage or whatever.
Yeah.
Like they have a particular disdain for nepo babies. So you cannot ride on that. You really do. And the sad thing is he has the potential to be that guy. Like when you listen to it, he's very well read. He's very it really has a good head on his shoulder. Use that, man. Like don't don't this not in this little petty politics or whatever's happening behind it.
And we'll continue to talk. I think he can make a good leader. We'll continue to talk about these issues. I want to say something before we end this session. People tend to think that this is really about a PhD. No, it's not really about a PhD. It's about a public intellectual being accountable to what he says. That's what this is about. I talked to Lual Dao. Lual Dao is the Secretary General of UPA, United People's Alliance. And when I was talking to him the first time, he did mention that there are opposition politicians with PhDs who think because they have PhDs, they should be the heads of political parties. Lual said that when I was talking to him, and he said that with context. There was nothing wrong with that. I didn't bring it up. This is the first time I bring it up. And if you watch my first interview with Lual Dao, he did say that. But he said that within a context of you say you have a PhD, so you should be the head of the party. No, that is wrong. And maybe that's what Mabior meant. Another person who said something about PhD was Rose Oduo when I talked to her. She also raised this issue of people pretending because they have PhD, they're somehow more politically savvy. But I didn't bring it up. It did not bring any uproar. I didn't write about it because she said that within context. So the issue here is the context in which Mabior said this. And then Mabior said, you said at the beginning when Mabior said, PhD, Din, for those of you who don't understand Tongajian, Din is an imbecile.
So it's calling PhDs imbecilic, basically.
Yes, yeah. So that's why you see people are really worried about what he said. He connected being a PhD with being an imbecile. Right. So the context of the narrative today is connected with something he said in the past. So this is not out of the vacuum. So that's what people don't understand. So if you think that being a PhD is somehow imbecilic, then that is problem.
Yeah, and it's important for the two examples that you talked about, Lual Dao, and I think it's important to think of context here because there's a history here, of where now we can take this one comment that he posted, that Mabior if we take it within the context of that whole history, it's very clear what he meant. It's very clear what the intention. So I think the uproar from the reaction to this is there is, when it's not just people reading between and over analyzing a small. It's what after that is the sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Like the disingenuous apology or whatever. The apology that wasn't really meant as an and then in the context of other sort of like things that he has said about academics and or when you put that all together, you get a sense that I'm genuinely now curious. Do you have a problem with that man? And as you say, you think that he doesn't. I want to hear that from the horse's mouth.
Okay. So I think we're coming towards the end. This is a very productive conversation. And for those of you who are watching, we need to have this conversation. So we'll invite, if you feel you want to be part of this conversation, just send me a well thought out email or a message on WhatsApp and explain what you want to talk about. And then Bior and I can have a conversation with you and have these conversations, because that's what I want. Anyone, absolutely anyone, whether you don't have a high school diploma or you don't have a PhD, you are welcome here. I don't really care about your degrees. I care about how you conceptualize things. I know two people. One of them is my colleague. He has a bachelor's degree and he's well informed. I can take him over any PhD. I'm not going to say his name, but he's my colleague. We came together, and I can take him over any PhD anytime. He's well informed. He has clarity of thought. We don't agree on things, but he can show you that he's educated. He only has a bachelor's degree. There's another guy, sometimes he writes silly comments. He doesn't have a degree. I think he has a diploma. I'm not sure, but he finished high school. His comments are very, very well informed. This guy doesn't have a degree. So I'm really careful about how I say things, because anyone, whether you're a high school student and you can really construct your thoughts, they are well informed, they are logical, you're by all means welcome. What I don't welcome is hatred. What I don't welcome is encouraging violence. That I will not entertain. But anyone is welcome on this platform. So I want to thank you, Bior. I know it's terrifying to be live.
Yeah.
People can actually tell.
Yeah. This is the first time I've done this. I've never been live on Facebook. So
I talk a lot. People may feel this is contradictory, but being live is something that terrifies me. But people here are very kind. I don't see any bad comments. These are really constructive comments.
Yeah.
But next time, what we'll do, we can invite you to the studio as an audience. And then instead of commenting, you can actually ask your own question in person within the studio. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's something I suggested to you earlier that South Sudanese politics is sort of your area of expertise. And I feel like you should have a lot more commentary. Like that video you did on this was very good enough. It would be good to have, take audience questions and you respond to them and let us hear what you have. I know that interviews are not conducive for that. If you're interviewing someone, you're trying to get them to say their own. But it would be really good to have this sort of sessions where you invite another guest that can interact with you in the same way that we did, and we get to hear, what you actually think. So I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed listening.
So thank you everyone, for those of you who have joined, and we'll continue to do these conversations, because I want to encourage open communication, and I'm going to reiterate this. This is a non-partisan platform. Some of you may not believe, whether you are in a SPLMIG or SPLMIO, or I don't know what political party you belong to, you are welcome here. I'm going to give you due respect, and you say what you want to say, as long as you don't encourage violence and division. And now the people who work for the government of South Sudan, you're also welcome. You can come here and defend the government of South Sudan. I'm okay with it. I'm going to ask you questions. I'm not going to put you on the spot. No. So it is just for you to inform South Sudanese, because as you know, there's so many things I don't know. So I don't know something about health. I don't know about the environment. I don't know about engineering. So I'm going to invite those people to inform the public. So people shouldn't be afraid. I know people in Juba think I hate the government. I don't hate the president. I only criticize the president so that the president can improve. Yeah. So, and that's the same thing we're doing to Mabior. Yeah. So that he can become a better leader.
Yeah. Now I hope he takes it in the way that it was meant, because it's not meant to be it's not meant to bring him down. It's to, as you say, make him a better leader, because we all know he has that.
Okay. So guys, we'll we'll stop. Bior, I'll
Okay.
talk to you after this for a while.
Okay.
But the rest of the guys, we're off air now. Thank you, everyone.